Okay.
We are live.
Oh,
We are live.
there she go.
Welcome, welcome. What a wonderful day to be live. We're so happy you're joining us on this first Monday of National Black History Month. I am Dr. Linda James Myers, and we have a wonderful group of panelists plus a wonderful guest today. I am past president of ABPSI as well as elder of Elders Emeritus, and many other roles I have played. But the role of the day is very important because this is our opportunity to cross generations and talk about very important topics so critical to our mental health and sustainable well-being as people from or acknowledging African ancestry. So all of us came from Akibu land, which is the name our ancestors gave for their land and their people. And so today we want to celebrate that because I don't know if there's any other group that can stake such a claim with authority. So having said that, we're having a little bit of technical difficulty, as you probably have discerned at this juncture. And I'll let the rest of our panelists introduce themselves. Would you like to go first, Elder?
I will jump in then. My name is Harvey Linder. I'm a retired semi-retired clinical psychologist in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I am a member of the ABPSI Ethics Committee. I'm a former Midwest Regional representative and a co-founder, past chair of the Minnesota chapter of ABPSI. And with that, I'll throw it to who wants to go next?
I'll go next. Hey, y'all. I'm Robina. I am I guess I'm an early career professional now. I'm still getting used to that life. Early career professional. First joined ABPSI in 2017 as a grad student, and one of the best decisions I made as a grad student, being able to join and have community and be able to see myself in the literature, in the space of academia and beyond. And so I'm grateful to still be connected to this community. And I will pass it over to Dr. Lassiter.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Jonathan Matthias Lassiter. I am a licensed clinical psychologist in New York. I'm also a professor at a college in New Jersey, and I specialize in working with Black sexual gender minorities from an African-centered perspective. And so I'm very excited to be here for this conversation today. And yeah, so Dr. Hickson, you want to go ahead and take it away?
Sure. So my name is Dr. Jonisha Hickson, newly minted. I'm also an early career professional within the association right now, serving as the DC ABPSI Vice Chair. And I'm really excited to have this conversation and to get back into the swing of things and to be joined by our esteemed national presidents. So I'll pass it to Dr. Bethea.
Hello, everyone. Sorry for the delay. Had some updates I had to do, apparently. So I was waiting for that. But hi, I'm Sharon Bethea, and I am the president of the Association of Black Psychologists Incorporated. Yay. I'm also professor at Northeastern Illinois University in African in counselor education, and I'm the coordinator of the African American Studies program there. And I'm also a co-founding member of the Genocide and Human Rights in African Diaspora Center, we lovingly call GRAD, and John Sharper's mom, Goldie Mae's daughter, Lewis Rogers' daughter, Nanny Lou, granddaughter, and Golden's granddaughter, and on and on and on and on. So giving honors to my ancestors and families and all the folks' shoulders I stand on.
Thank you so very
Happy to
much.
be here.
Happy to have you here.
Nana Linda, you sound very like quiet to
Mhm.
on our end.
Okay, let's see. I did figure out I am not at home. I am not on my computer. So I'm quite lost. Is that better? No
Yeah,
different.
you're a little quiet.
It's still quiet. Let's see.
Yeah.
So if you go on like the settings, I don't know, are you using a Mac or HP?
Got
Microsoft?
that.
A Mac. So if you go on, so click on the zoom.us like button at the top. It's like a toolbar.
Okay.
And then click on preferences.
Okay.
And then click on the audio tab.
All right.
And then you'll see speaker, microphone. So
Mhm.
go to the microphone and then the input volume you should push that all the way up.
And you know it is all the way up, so I'm not really sure.
Well, that's weird. Does the microphone say same as system? So is it coming from the MacBook?
Is that better?
Oh, that's
Yeah.
much
Okay.
right. We move. Y'all, Facebook
In-house
is trying
tech.
to sabotage us. Are we here?
Well, thank you so very much. I needed the guidance of the wisdom children. No, they're actually not children. Flourishing young professionals, and so happy to have them. We're so quite honored at this first Monday of the National Black History Month to be talking about Mentacide from a global perspective. And who better to be guest for this discussion is our ABPSI president, Dr. Sharon Matthias. So, Dr. Sharon, would you share with us your thoughts?
Oh, about the notion of global menticide. Um, and I'm gonna defer for you for just a second. Can you define for folks what menticide is?
Absolutely. Within the organization, there's certain terminology we just take for granted, not realizing often people going, what? What's that? Okay.
Right.
So it's quite appropriate to be using this term today because it also places um, tremendous honor on Dr. Bobby Wright, who coined the term decades ago. And menticide means the systematic destruction of a people's mind and a people's culture. And as Black people, not only in this country and the Americas, but throughout the world, there has been an attempt to foster, promote, and infuse menticide, the systematic destruction of not only our minds, but our culture, our way of life, our way of viewing the world, our way of being in the world. And so that is so pervasive, but unfortunately, we don't control the educational system
Mhm.
for the most part of our people, nor do we control the cultural frameworks for putting out there a particular narrative or our perspective. So what happens in a white supremacist culture and in a white supremacist global culture, whether it's being first started through caste chattel enslavement or colonialism or neocolonialism, our minds have been impacted in a negative kind of way, and our culture as well. So what we're about today is looking at menticide globally. And so being then what we want to be able to do is to see, and we want you to be able to think about in what ways has my mind and the minds of members of my community been influenced by this menticidal process. And
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you. And I'm just gonna read. There was an article that says anonymous, but I think I know who wrote it. Sounds like something Ancestor. Oh yeah, go to the end. I think Ancestor Conrad Worrell wrote about, and this notion of menticide, the ultimate threat to the Black race. And in it, he has a quote from Dr. Wright that says, 4 years before Dr. Wright's untimely death in 1984, he wrote a profound article entitled Menticide, the ultimate threat to the Black race. And in defining menticide, Dr. Wright explains that it is the deliberate and systematic destruction of a person's or a group's mind, which may give a clue to why the Black race after developing such an advanced civilization, has for the last 400 years been assisting in its own destruction and the nearly total subjugation of Africa by foreign invaders, which takes her straight to this notion of global genocide. And when we talk about genocide and mass killings that is going on the continent right now. And I'm giving all homage to, I'm one of them people, I love Black History Month. And we do this notion of Blackness 365 days of the year, but this 28 days, we celebrated with the world about understanding who we are, who we be, how stunning we are. And just lately, this notion of everything that's going on in the news, this notion of mass killing and genocide. And when I think about that notion in looking at global Mentacide, the systematic destruction that we actually start to participate in ourselves, I think about the notion that many people don't know. There are 40 million Africans displaced on the continent, 40 million on the continent, because of this notion of mass murder and genocide. There are 4 active wars on the continent. There are 32 countries that are affected by this. And so as I do the work, and just recently in December, I've just come back from the country of Burundi, where we study mass murder and genocide on the ground. This year, we were given permission to actually go to mass graves and literally walk into a room and they unzip, and on walls and everywhere, just bones of our people everywhere. So thinking through this, I'm trying to understand this notion, and pretty much propagated and instigated by the Belgians and the Germans. And this ongoing process of how whiteness actually, for lack of a better word, brainwashes us to a point that we actually start destroying ourselves. So in these cases, when we talk about mass murder and genocide, it's what we hear in the news and what's sensationalized are 2 African tribes killing each other in that entire region. I think what we don't look at is the participation in the West. So right now, Congo, thousands of people being murdered, slaughtered, genocide, however you want to define it. And if you dig deeper, it's around their resources, where we want to say, oh, it's the Africans killing the Africans, without looking at the system that actually set that in motion. And so when we thought about genocide and having a conversation with Nana Linda, this notion of global menticide that has happened, because when you look in Darfur, which becomes an interesting thing to look at, because anywhere that you read about Darfur and the killings, it's basically all non-Arab tribes being killed. But it's nuanced because when we talk about Arab, they look African, right? And so how do we begin to actually look at this, analyze this, think about this, talk about this, have the world participate? Because, and how do we not do this again? Right now, Burundi, it seems to happen, they've had 5. People are like, oh, we could talk about Rwanda because it was sensationalized in a movie that wasn't even true. Well, not all the facts were true. The hotel absolutely exists, but that's not how it happened. We know about Rwanda. Burundi's right beside it. They've had 5. I don't think people even heard about 1, right? We kind of hear about Congo. We kind of hear about Darfur. We kind of hear about Sudan. And, but we don't tune into it and why. And so my question is, why don't we know? What is that about? Why is there so much apathy when that many Africans are being killed and displaced? And that's me saying that I've traveled to the continent, And I've only been to 16 countries because my goal is to do all 54, 55. And it is like the most unbelievable, like miracle kind of place on earth, from the people to the land to the waters. But we have this kind of dual thing existing on the continent of absolute stunning and beautiful. I know the last time I visited, what they would say on the continent is that the best stuff happens in Africa and the worst. But we don't talk about the worst, and the worst is pretty bad. So I guess I put it out there in conversation to talk about, why don't we know? Why don't we act? Why don't we push harder? Like, for instance, Chicago passed an historic bill 2 days ago, which, hey. But I remember some of us saying, but nobody ever went to bat for Africa like that. Right? Why? As we see all these other historic bills going on about other spaces and other places, when in that region so much is going on. And we know it's a fight over resources. We know it's this notion of Mentacide. We know it's about the West attack. Since before the Geneva Conference, when all the white countries got together and decided to divide Africa, what people don't know, they are actually doing it again now, right? What is this notion that it's okay to mass murder literally millions of Africans and nobody talks about it? So let's kind of put that out on the table to have a discussion about. And where do we see ourselves in this notion of never again? Because I went to Rwanda's anniversary and they were like, never again. You talk to the people, they're like, we're worried it's going to happen again. They are worried it's going to happen again. Every 10 years in Burundi, the last one in 2015. This is 224. There are people worrying about it happening again. And so how do we become part of that conversation?
Dr. Bethia, can you say a bit more about who's warring and what the structure is? We know with, or we know what we're told. You mentioned warring tribes, but how did the tribes get to be warring? And I think that one of the things we tend to think about, if we really study it, is neocolonialism. We know when the colonists left, they didn't even take their ideas, and they left a system in place.
Absolutely, absolutely. So absolutely, this is a consequence of the historical legacies of colonialism and neocolonialism and imperialism, period, right? It's long had a shadow on Africa, right? This notion of making up arbitrary borders, exploiting the people, right? Putting in on purpose by design systems that are unstable. And even if they start to stable, making sure they're unstable again. This is what the West does. Their influence on, because one of the big things is the governments of these countries, but it's also the West and America setting up these governments, starting these fights. So, i.e., for instance, in the Burundi, in the Rwanda area, that basically, it becomes interesting me studying there. Everybody is the most magnificent Black. I mean, like dark, stunning skin. But one tribe literally had a long nose. Literally, taller. Otherwise, not only looked alike, that before this imperialist colonization happened, they were married to each other, kicking it with each other. And because of their long nose and being taller, white people were like, hey, okay. Your nose is a little longer, you're a little taller. So, which becomes the description of whiteness for them. And they play the long game. So over time, they not only educate who they've identified looks white because they have a long nose and they're tall, which is hilarious. And not in a funny way. Educate them and make sure the other tribes who don't look closer to white get no education. Resources, no resources. Housing, name it all, helping with lands. And then when independence happens, right, that particular tribe is left in charge and given all the resources. Well, and of course, when we're talking about this seasoning, so we talk about seasoning that's happened over, I think the Belgians came in the 1700s, right? Over a long period of time, I relate more with the white folks who gave me power, gave me education, did all that. In my being and way of being, where we get the masses, because it was the masses, who were not educated, right? And at some point, because even in this case, if I say the Tutsis and the Hutu were the majority, right? The Tutsis to white folks look more like white folks, right? So now it's left, this ongoing seasoning has happened. Now, this particular tribe, after seasons for a couple hundred years, they also take on the same behaviors as their colonizers, right? And they do it to the folks who are the masses. So a war ensues. And then every time it comes down, something happens to make it assume, oh, all of a sudden we get our first Hutu president and the plane gets shot out of the air and they find the daughter and the children dead. There's many, many stories about why that happened. But again, so it stirs it up. I thought we're in peace. You killed our first president. So it happens over and over and over and over and over again. They destabilize it on purpose. See, I told you the Hutus couldn't run this country. Look at this. Come up with human rights violations, the same one that we perpetuate in America. These very same ones. So I even think about, although Tanzania is not the same thing, but the ongoing concern when the LGBTQ issue was talked about in Tanzania, and they defined it as a human rights violation of what they did. The next thing you know, we gonna take care of that. The next thing we know that we're running their resources. So you see it happening the same way it's always happened, right? And these have been mass weapons of war for a very long time. This is nothing new, right? Right down to right now, they're still making Haiti pay. This is not, oh, all of a sudden Haiti went crazy. They're still making Haiti pay for what happened in the Haitian Revolution. And oh, they just found a motherload of oil. It's the same old war game they play. They start disruption and chaos. I'm not sure, across my news feed, and I found a hard time even researching it further. Mexico won, I don't know if anybody else heard about it, a $5 billion settlement from America because they had evidence to prove that all the not drug trafficking, gun trafficking into Mexico came from America. I'm still trying to find it. It came across the news feed. I'm sure it's hard for people to get to. So all this time you've been blaming Mexico for this gun trafficking, and you find out it's actually you trafficking guns in there and it coming back. So just little war games they've always played. This is how it's always been played. I get a little annoyed when people act like this is something new. And so how do we begin to disrupt as a people? Because it's all about colonization, taking of resources, most always from the West, right? Playing these games for the long haul. I think we tend to think more in the moment about things when war is strategic and long-term and calculated over periods of time. We even think about what happened to Haile Selassie, right? They didn't forget, right? And the genocides that happened in Ethiopia based on a war that he won, right? And they come back much later, blindside somebody and just bomb everybody, right? So yes, it's a war game that the West has always played on the continent of Africa and in South America and in other places in the world. But specific to Africa. I don't know if that answered your question, but because it's so complicated, so complex.
Madam President, you raised something early on when you talked about oftentimes it's Africans doing this to other Africans and not being conscious of that, the sameness, that's there. Can you say a little more about how the internalization of the Mentacide causes us oftentimes to focus on those outside of ourselves or those that we see as other from ourselves, focus on them as perpetuating the problem and not being able to become conscious of the role that Mentacide has played in affecting our own thinking about the problem and not seeing the role that we've adopted in perpetuating the problem because of the effect that Mentacide has had on our thinking?
I'm going to take it larger than that. When are we going to realize that it's white folks doing this? Because what we tend to do now is we blame each other and we go after each other with not talking about what white folks have done to us. So it's like, how are we going to think about our Mentacide when we ain't telling folks about Mentacide? Right? So we participate in our children being part of this. Right. And I mean, even in the case of in their school system, they were literally teaching that the other tribe was a roach, because that was the name, is I'm killing a roach. Right. So we talk about, and I go back to Bobby Wright and the book he wrote about white folks being the article, which everybody in my classes have to read, that white folks are psychopaths. Why aren't we teaching that? Right? Because I think for me, a shift happens when I see, oh, this is bigger than this. I remember asking the question in Burundi, just we were sitting around because we interview survivors and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I asked the question, and actually this was prompted from Baba Nobles, because he asked me the question. I'm like, oh, let me ask them. It's a very, very Christian country. How do they actually think through this whole notion, brotherly love and Christianity and right, blah, 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 and thou shalt not kill? How do you justify that in the midst of genocide? And I got an answer that I was not expecting from a dignitary who said, interesting question, and I'm paraphrasing. I guess when you think about their Christianity, it is a way of doing religion. He said, first he said it's performative. Because I guess I have to say this is probably performative. I get up and go to mass. I get up and go to church. I teach my children to do the same thing. So that's the performance part. He said the next part is when I think about their Christianity on a deep level, it's actually a religion that separates you from your soul. And if you can separate me from my soul, it ain't nothing for me to kill. I did not expect that answer because they're very Christian. There was actually a pastor in the room. And I looked at him, I'm like, so what are your thoughts on that? He goes, and it took him a long time to get it. He goes, as I follow him, I guess I would say the same, i.e. why I'm making a choice to leave. So this notion of their systems of religion, their systems of education, it's so insidious. Even the same thing, if folks that hang out, we're the nicest people ever, right? 3,000 tribes, 3,000 tribes, over 2,000 languages. There's a lot of separate stuff going on. So it's easy to do that. We let people in. We've always been that way. It's like, dang, it's like, you got $1 and it'd be like, you want 70 cents? For real. Oh, let's buy some food and we all eat off this $1. So it's like a notion of the kind of essence who we are as African people. The manipulation of an insidious way of being. I'm not saying that things, and people, you're romanticizing Africa. Well, it's better than romanticizing America. Number one. Number two, of course things happen because that's human beingness. Of course, human beingness things happen, but this notion of the insidiousness of the way genocide was done from the West.
Mhm.
So in my thoughts, one of the way to educate our people is to tell them. When I tell my students this in their class, they're like, nobody ever told me, but you want to now get in my face because why did I hit my brother? If you'd have told me that, I might not have. I remember, and I'll stop. Maybe no. ABPSI conference in Chicago. I don't know how many people went, but remember I took to the Center for Inner City Studies. Prior to that, we'd had a meeting with the youth from MLK around the young sister who was shot. There were young people on the stage, and I did the same thing like I did at ABPSI. I don't want to hear a grown-up, when you finish, I don't want to hear a grown-up say nothing. Ask every young person in this room. So this is one thing they said. They were thankful for the Center for Inner City Studies because we started doing African American studies in the morning before school started. Those kids would rush to get there. Their parents talked about it. What they said was, thank you, because somebody finally told me who I am. And now that I'm learning who I am, I have no inkling to hurt my brother. And then said to the audience, y'all have deserted us. And understand, without community and without y'all, we kill. And everybody was like, I didn't expect him to say kill. We kill. We're disconnected from you. So I can go on and talk about what young people are doing, but what do we do? How do we connect? We made decisions around what we thought was a better life for our kids. And I ain't fault nobody for that. But I know when I talk to the youth in my classes, they felt like we deserved them. Why didn't we tell them in the first place? What's going on with this? I didn't know, right? And now it becomes insidious and ingrained because we're fighting over resources. And so that piece has to happen, right? And not just stop doing that. Like, what's that? Say no to drugs campaign, really? We're talking about an insidious, generational disease perpetuated by people who think it's normal. I'm talking about the West. This is their normal way of being, right? That we've been inundated with for hundreds of years. Because if we go prior, not like I said, killings weren't happening, tribal fighting wasn't happening. Before that happened, the continent was not like that.
Dr. Lassiter, you had a comment.
Yes, I'm just so full from all of this. So thank you, Dr. Bethia. I think you had asked something about the youth were asking, why do you teach us this? And you also mentioned, like, when are we going to say it's the white people that's doing it? And so that sparked two thoughts. I had the pleasure of going to Ghana about a year back, and I was talking to my tour guide, and I was asking about indigenous forms of healing and whatnot, because, it's my first time on the continent, so I'm like excited. I'm like, oh, I've been reading all this African-centered theory. I'm about to go, and I'm about to get, from the source. And my tour guide looked at me like, I had two heads and was like, oh, no, I'm Christian. I don't do that. Right. And so I was like, oh, so this goes back to this Mentacide piece. Right. And I also think about part of we can't give people what we don't have. And I think a lot of the parents don't have that. A lot of the parents don't know it's the white people. Right. And if they do know, here's another thing. If they do know, it's easier. It's a easier target are other Black people, other African people.
Way easier.
Right. Than their European colonizers. So there's also that piece as well. Like, maybe I do know, maybe I have some inkling that it's this colonization, these European Arab colonizers. Maybe I have some inclination that is, Chinese business folks who are coming over and convincing us to do, to stop my people from fishing, so that to give the rights to the Chinese. But it's easier to get mad at the person I see who's stopping in front of me, and that person looks like me.
And I think
Absolutely.
that's one of the reasons I think we have to go deeper than it's the white people. It's the white consciousness. Not because obviously if it was the people, we wouldn't see us doing each other in. So when Bobby Wright talked about Mentacide, he said the systematic destruction of people's mind. When we take on the mindset, the worldview, if you will, of the Euro-Western orientation that allows us to not be connected to spirit and to not be fully human and to prioritize materialistic greed over every other thing, then we're going to do the same thing. But I think we have some wonderful comments in our Facebook.
And I just want to hop in and say that fragmentation piece, Dr. Mike, that's what I was thinking about too, right? That concept of fragmentation. We don't see ourselves as actually connected or responsible to each other.
That's true.
And I agree. When I say white people, I mean the system. Y'all know me. It's like white people's. But yes, I mean the system of whiteness that we talk about. Like white people, no. White systems, white consciousness, absolutely.
Yeah, the Facebook audience is really just echoing the need for us to continue to have conversations like this. So you just might have to come back, Dr. Kathia, so we can have more discussion around this, because folks are, I think, just feeling enlightened by you sharing about what's going on in Africa, and then other folks who have been aware of it sharing that, you know, it just kind of seems like the same old war games, in quote, media not wanting us to, you know, really stick on that. So that's why people are not hearing about it. And then there is a question about, what is that book that you said you require your students to read?
Oh, the article by Bobby Wright, psychopathic personality
Okay.
disorder.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's the racial psychopathic
Yes.
personality disorder. I require my students to read it too. So yeah, I think that's the one.
Okay, so I'll link that for them.
Yep.
Um,
And putting out
and
other resources. Yep. Go ahead. I'm sorry, JoJo.
I was actually going to say, yeah, I have a comment too based on, thank you. We love your tangents always. Hopefully we'll be seeing them in reels and clips on social media very soon with our new marketing lady. But so I feel like I would be remiss not to mention that this idea of menticide is the reason why a lot of people have opinions about ABPSI's positionality and some statements that we've decided to make or not to make. And I think it would be unfair to not mention that or, you know, give light to it. A lot of people, you know, have been saying free Palestine and are 100% against the genocide going on there. And of course, we also, you know, stand in that solidarity as the Association of Black Psychologists. And we know, and we have talked about it a lot, that our solidarity is bound up, or our liberation is bound up in one another. But it wouldn't be very myopic of us as the Association of Black Psychologists to say, you know, free Palestine and not also shed light on the genocides happening to African people in the continent. And I think that for, you know, this idea to be true, that our liberation is bound up in one another, then we have to absolutely talk about and uplift the genocides happening on the continent. And we know that Mentacide is the reason why the media is not giving as much coverage to what's going on in the Congo or Rwanda or all the other places or genocides happening on the continent, because that anti-Blackness, you know, it promotes who is considered human or whose humanity is prioritized over other people. And that's not to say that people, just because they have lighter skin, like Palestinians, don't deserve, you know, to die and to have a genocide against them. But I feel like, you know, we have to be very clear that African people are also dying in large numbers, and we're not hearing about it. Like, we have to go out of our way to find out what's happening. And thank God that we have, you know, a very informed president and other people in the association who are having these conversations and uplifting what's happening to our people. And so I just wanted to briefly say that this Mentacide is definitely directly correlated to, you know, this outpouring of support for Palestinians, and rightfully so. But it's also responsible for the reason that we're not seeing that much media attention or solidarity or support for African people also being killed, who have been dealing with genocide for many years. And, you know, I can't speak to the genocides as an expert because I'm still learning about it day by day. So I'm really happy to have conversations like this where we are standing on those values of Maya with, truth, justice, and reciprocity. And so basically, I wanted to say definitely free Palestine, but keep that same energy for African people who are also dying. And I'm done.
It's so
And when I
interesting.
say Center Africa, I mean,
Mhm.
and I'm just going to speak for a second. Yes. I think the last time I heard Sharon Bethia doesn't have a backbone, I walk fine. So I'm going to let the world know. And how dare you say that to me? Because that's all you got to say when I'm on the ground. I ain't got a backbone because I don't make a statement about Palestine. It ain't that I don't think that's wrong. I think that's insane what's going on in Palestine. What I'm saying that for those of you who are in me, I get on a plane and I'm on the ground in Africa working on genocide, right? And I walk fine. And it's interesting when it came to me that way. And so it is not like I'm ignoring any of that, but I'm going to talk about Africa and I'm going to be okay in that, right? And when people say, I didn't know, I'm like, exactly, right? Because it's also very political why we know about other people's genocide. That's very, very political. And so I just want to keep Africa in the forefront, be about our mission, the liberation of African people. I'm okay in that. And we all know when we are free, everybody's free. We all know that. Period.
Yeah,
Period.
I love that you said that because that's what I was thinking. I mean, our people of African descent, particularly in the American context, our movements for freedom have always been a blueprint for everyone else's movements for freedom. So, I mean, to center that, it's not anti-Palestinian, it's not anti anyone else. It is, as you say, centering us. And again, that Mentacide piece, that I mean, we are the blueprint. Let's just say that, serious, right? It's a fact. It's not even like, ego thing. It's a fact. And so if we can figure this thing out for us, imagine the doors we can open up for other people.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, we've been working on this for so long, we have figured out quite a bit. And that's why we're having this conversation today about menticide. Because if you haven't picked it up already, when we talk about menticide, we're talking about the psychology of oppression and its impact on people's psyches. And the methods of oppression we've talked about before, which is to convince people their survival and well-being is in the hands of their captor or their colonizer, is in the hands of people who run the system, deny people access to the truth of their history and culture, negate their history and culture, elevate the history and culture of the Eurocentric idea, and divide and conquer. And so basically what we have when we talk about menticide is what is it called? The Willie Lynch framework, now universalized across the globe because it's been so effective here. It's been so effective here. And so when we think about menticide in the global context, we don't want to skip over here. We are menticidal here. We don't see the mass genocide. We see what do we call the terroristic destruction. So we'll kill a child here, a child there, an innocent victim here, an innocent victim there, by the people who are being paid to serve and protect us, and nothing happens. That's some heavy duty menticide.
Mm-hmm.
When you cannot trust or count on the people who your tax dollars pay to protect and serve you, they can actually randomly kill you. And so for a while there, the talk. Have you had the talk? You need to make children aware of who they are, where they are, and how they got here.
Absolutely.
But in addition to that, which is necessary but insufficient, you also need to armor them. You need to teach them a way of being in the world whereby they not only have an armor, they're inoculized to racism. There's no reason why Black people on this continent and throughout the world, for that matter, should be dying of internalized depression. Can we not yet see how these people behave, have always behaved? And do we always have to subject ourselves to what they think when it's very clear whatever they're thinking, not working? It's not working well. We have depletion of resources. We have wars everywhere. We have elite economic system that is fine destroying all of humanity if they get more profit. So I am so happy we're having this conversation today, because when we think of menticide globally, we're really talking about a menocidal condition that prevents us from seeing the interrelatedness and the interdependence of all things, that gets us trapped in it. Either or kind of reasoning. Well, if we're for this, we must be anti that. How many people know that many, many, many Jewish people are Black? They're African descent. Many, many Palestinians are Black. Now, the fact that the media doesn't cover that, I wonder why. Must not serve to the benefit of those people the media is serving.
And it doesn't serve to the benefit, and they are also anti-Black.
Yeah.
We don't want to think that about, right? They're anti-Black. I've been to Israel and Palestine. They're anti-Black.
Yeah.
And so it's like, so you would have to have that conversation, right? So how do we center African voices, amplify them, provide platforms? So I appreciate this every day for us to talk about, hold people accountable, right? What is that inoculation? And we have models. So as I talk about spaces and places, there are models where, like Jonathan said, this notion of, yes, when you walk into the continent and ask for indigenous, people are going to go sideways, but it's more like because they don't trust you. Because I've been to so many spaces in Ghana of traditional, same thing in Tanzania. There are meccas called Bakamoyo, which is nothing but a town of traditional African healers, but it's like, because of the destruction of what we're doing, very protected. And what does it mean for me to say to a foreigner that I'm not Christian, right? It's like, and even in my work in Burundi, I was always stunned after doing interviews, and I may ask the question, so what do you mean cause this? That, I forget who said, they knew, they would say, oh, the Belgians and the Germans. Even though they continue to perpetuate the menticide, they could say, oh, the Belgians and Germans did it, but what's going on now so internally that we can't let that go, right? And that, and how do we work on that? And what is the inoculation for that? Because I think that should be a big part of our work, right? It's because we haven't even figured out it in America for our kids, right? As we see, yeah. Somebody actually had to tell me one time, didn't think the enslavement of African people in America was genocide. Really? Even by the narrow definition by the UN, every single one ticks off that this country is genocidal to African people. And so how do we join the voices? Because there are voices out there, because we act like nobody is working on this. How do we join it? How do we look at the models? How do we make the models out? On the continent of Africa, there are people, look at the countries now that are kicking French people out. I'm so happy, kicking English people out, right? Why what happened in Zimbabwe happened in Zimbabwe? There was a reason why they were taking those ships, right? So it's like, how do we center those voices so we can be heard and get to our kids? I'm sorry. I'm so passionate about this. I'm just talking. Jonathan, I'm sorry.
No, I just had oh no, I just had a question for the folks with a little bit more perspective than myself. It's because you're right, there are models, right? And this is something that I'm educating myself about, I educate my students about. And these forces still control the systems of survival. And a lot of times people are going to choose survival over all else. So like, how do we manage that? I don't know. So I'm asking you.
Great question.
The depression process, isn't it? To get you to believe that your survival is dependent on following the captor, the slave master, the colonist way. So we don't pay attention enough to the role our belief system plays. We give our power up far too readily to someone else. And we lose sight of what other access points, what other resources we have. When you talked about it, I think it was you who mentioned in Africa, you might have people who are Christian, But you better believe there'll be a time when they go to the traditional healer.
Always.
Help
Always.
going on. So they're not caught up in the either or. Over here we'll do this for that, but over here we'll do the other.
They
And
live their spirit. Absolutely. They live their spirit. It's part of who they are, right?
what's gonna be ultimately our grounding. But one of the problems we have with the menticidal condition is we're still falling into the trap of a Euro-Western worldview that is fragmented, that is fractured, that is not only fractured, but prioritizes the materialist view, which is interesting because the height of their science says no. The height of their science says it's the spiritual aspect that is the controlling, that is the controller. And we then have the capacity to tap into what's really true. I know one of the groups that of young people that I talked to at HBCU a few years ago, they were mad, and there were a lot of hip hop artists there, and they were mad because they said their parents lied to them. And I said, I'm not sure if the parents lied to them or did your parents do the best they knew at the time. But hopefully, we're doing better now because we know now the consequences of the decisions that we have made in the past. And
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, no, I was just saying, do we like literally have 3 minutes left?
do.
Yes, I was also saying we didn't hear from Dr. Onwanga, so really
Yeah,
quick.
that's what I was getting ready to say. Can we hear from?
So that
Yep, you're reading my mind.
I just have so many thoughts, but I also like similar to what Dr. Jonathan said, I was just taking everything in. So yeah, I would love for us to have a part two. Something that really stuck with me, and I think that I also just stand on, is the fact that we all brought up the anti-Blackness, and anti-Blackness is something that benefits the patriarchal, capitalistic, hegemonic agenda that's going on across the world, and especially in imperialistic countries like the United States. And so it makes sense that they'll use that as a foundation for everything else that's going on. So I also truly do believe, like you mentioned, Dr. Bethan, how ancestor Fannie Lou Hamer said, like our, liberation is wrapped up in each other's, but really once Black people and African people are free, and once we kind of break out of this mindset of we are each other's enemy because of featureism or colorism or whatever else is going on, that we'll be able to really do something, like really turn something upside down, because that's what they're scared of, the whiteness, the white system. They're scared of all of that. That's why they stripped us of our identity. They didn't want us to be able to read or write, because we really get things going when we do that. We're very innovative. Even when our ancestors were not able to read or write or have access to music, they found a way to praise God. They found a way to stay alive and escape. And so yeah, that's what they're scared of. And I think that once we all figure that out, that the power is within ourselves and our community, then we're going to be unstoppable. And we'll also be able to help to liberate everybody else. Because like you said, Dr. Jonathan, we are the blueprint, not off no ego thing, but that's just what it is.
First step, letting go of false
Yeah. And I see JoJo wanted to make one last comment. And Africa will be free. Africa will be free.
By any means necessary. Sorry, I just wanted to say that also I feel like it would be a little performative for us to, not that it would be bad, but it would be performative. I feel like we have to stop with this idea of activism, that we are not against a certain thing if we don't speak about it or put out a statement about it or do a certain thing. Because it's like we can know in our hearts and spirit that this genocide is wrong and still be focusing on the liberation of our people who are not getting that support globally, right? We haven't seen a response to the genocide happening in Palestine for Africans at all. We got people, stopping ship or weapons or ships from importing materials to the Israeli state or the oppressors. We haven't seen that for Black people or for Africans. And then I will also venture to say that, like Nana Linda said, I personally feel like African people in the Americas, non-immigrant, are also, experiencing genocide. We have unsafe neighborhoods, food that is not healthy or nutritious for our people. Our education systems are failing us, or, hiding true history from our people. So like genocide can be, applied in multiple different ways, and that hasn't been responded to in the ways that we need in America.
Heart attack, high rates of infant mortality. Not only are those symptoms of genocide, it's actually laid out in the crazy UN. It's like, and they are very narrow, that those things are genocide too, because it's a direct cause from what happened to us over the last 400 years. So yes, we're in a genocidal state. That's why we have some of the highest rates of cancer, heart disease. That's part of the genocide, and it's spelled out to be so.
And I agree that all those things are important. And I agree with Dr. Hickson that we can't be expected to be responding to every issue that comes up. We need to have our own strategic direction about where we're going. Otherwise, if we're just responding to all the issues that come up, we're being puppeted by the folks who are creating the Mentacide in the first place. So we don't want to be puppets that are just, dancing to the tune of whatever issue is thrown out there.
You can't be a puppet if indeed you think above the level of the puppet masters.
Mm, sure.
Honorable Marcus Garvey had a plan. He amassed the largest Black movement in the history. So that's a good model to turn to begin to look at and to replicate. Also, the Association of Black Psychologists, we have a lot of people who spend a lot of time looking at these problems, trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. And we found some things that work extraordinarily well. So despite the fact that the mainstream media, educational system, political systems, economic systems aren't interested in liberating anybody, we have to take our power back and liberate ourselves. Any last thoughts? We started a minute or two late, so we can end a minute or two late.
Someone said, Munaza, she's a member of DC shout out DC. She said, agreed, I would love for there to be a part 2 on Mentacide that also focuses on recommendations on how parents and others can support our youth, students, families, and colleagues have these conversations in a gentle and non-judgmental way. So we definitely will be having a part 2. I'm also wondering if we can have a part 1.5, like a recorded conversation, and then put it on the Global Institute or somewhere where people can listen in on, our continued thoughts. Our second part will feature a student from Columbia, Tariq. He's also a member of ABPSI, I want to say. Very brilliant. He has a lot of knowledge about what's going on in the continent. So I thought that he could add a lot of perspective, but there will certainly be a part 2.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
I always come back. Just let me know.
We're so appreciative of having you come.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
And please, 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 our listeners and participants, let us know what you're interested in talking about. Let us know what you're interested in learning more about, because we're here to serve. We're here to serve. So it's been a pleasure. Peace and blessings to all until the next time.
Thank you.